Hello and welcome to another YouTube video. How did you find me? So I've been going through a bunch of spooky movies that I watched in October because it's December, and we're going to continue doing that. My name is Sarah Zedig, my pronouns are she, her. This is the top 30 spooky movies that I watched in the month of October in the year of 2022, except there are more of them, and they're not all spooky movies. And they're not also ranked in any particular order. I'm just going through them chronologically, the date that I watched them. If you want to watch part one of this video, go do that. Otherwise, keep watching this one, I guess. October 18th, Cat People, 1982. I went into Cat People wanting to like it because I like off-putting movies. The Company of Wolves was a movie that I thought was weird and enchanting and good and deserves to be looked at in terms of like reevaluating what we even consider a good movie. Cat People is not one of those. Cat People has a lot of bits and bobs of good movies. There's some good stuff in Cat People. The stuff with the actual cougar that's painted black, I think is what it is. It's not an actual panther. It's like another big cat that they painted black. A lot of that stuff is really effective. I don't know how humane it was, but whatever. It looks cool. It's cool that they used a real big cat, I guess. A lot of that stuff is really intimidating and interesting, and when this movie is sort of deranged and psychosexual, it works. I like the ending. The ending is pretty cool. Unfortunately, this movie is about incest. And it's weird. It's sort of weird in its fixation on incest, and it doesn't really need that at all. It would have been a better movie without the incest part, and that kind of takes out of it, and it's just sort of slow plotting, doesn't really know where it's going or what it's doing. It's a weird movie. I don't know that I like it very much, but it had some bits that I liked. It felt more like it took place in a real zoo than most movies that are about taking place in places, so that was nice. I always like it when it feels like the people who are in a movie, who are workers, actually feel like they have a job with responsibilities. It always bugs me when you have a character in a movie who's like, oh yeah, I work full-time at this thing. Anyway, I'm going to spend the entire movie going on a misadventure. You don't have time for misadventures when you're full working. Tragedy Girls, 2017. Tragedy Girls is a movie about these two Gen Z weirdo girls who are really into true crime. They are creating their own serial killings that are occurring in their small town. It's a horror comedy. I'm sure there's all sorts of buzzwords that people have thrown at this movie. I liked Tragedy Girls a lot. I gave it 4.5 stars on LETTERBOXD. I don't really put much methodology into how I rate movies on LETTERBOXD. I could see this movie not working. Really what I wished was that this movie had been shot in the 80s with film cameras and shittier lenses and with actors who didn't look like they stepped off the set of like a Vanity Fair photo shoot. But this is a complaint that I have with basically every movie that gets made now. So it's hard for me to like hold this specifically against Tragedy Girls. I just wish that movies cast people with faces, you know, faces that you know, you look at them and you go, oh, that's a human being right there. It very accurately understands that people who are obsessed with true crime are kind of sick freaks who should not be trusted. I found its sense of humor really good. It grew on me as the film went on. I found that it was a lot smarter than I necessarily had given it credit for at the start. I think it's very funny that a lot of the guys that are in this movie are very clearly like way too old to be cast in the roles that they're in. Like there were some high school guys who were like very clearly in their late 20s. Yeah, it's a fun movie. It felt like an interesting parallel to the movie that I started this video series with, Super Dark Times. That took its premise very seriously and looked at the psychological impacts of what it was doing. Tragedy Girls is much more satirical, and I think it's better for that. I think Tragedy Girls fits in right alongside Jennifer's Body, which is also a perfect movie. I don't know what else really to say about it besides just that I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time with it. I had fun. Sometimes a movie can just be fun. Sometimes movies can be fun. Did you know that horror movies can be fun? Okay. What's next? What keeps you alive? Oh, What Keeps You Alive? Oh, I remember this movie. What Keeps You Alive? This movie is one of the only movies that I can think of off the top of my head. I guess besides Cat People, but even Cat People had its redeeming qualities. This is the movie that I did not like, and my friends and I were really not super into it. So it is a movie about this married lesbian couple who go out to their vacation home in the woods, and I guess they're about to get married or they're celebrating their anniversary, and it turns out that one of the girlfriends is a serial killer. She just gets married to women and steals their money and then kills them and gets away with it because of toxic masculinity. Well, see, that's the thing. So this movie, the script, when it was written, it was written with a man in mind. The director saw a story in the New York Times or somewhere about some guy who had, gotten married to a bunch of lonely young women and stayed with them long enough to get like an insurance policy out on them or whatever, and then killed them and took the money. Did that over and over and over again. And then wrote a script about that. It's like, oh, that's a great premise for a horror movie. And then decided to do gender blind casting and cast a woman in the role. And I will say that the leads do a pretty good job. They're pretty good actors. They fill their roles really well. Unfortunately, the film doesn't make a lick of sense and is sort of just misery porn. I shouldn't linger on this one too much longer. It's become kind of a recurring hate subject for us as a movie of like, wow, that one felt gross. It feels like it's coming from a bad place. It feels like a movie that is very cynically cashing in on the sort of, oh, we're doing stories about Me Too and we're doing stories about women and like people of color and queer people and all of that. So we're going to have it be lesbians. But it still feels a movie that is about a straight heterosexual relationship. And I think this film is a great example of the limitations of like colorblind or gender blind casting. The very premise of like a guy who gets married to lonely women to kill them and get insurance money off of them. That is a very specific sociological relationship that has very real origins in the material conditions of how people live in the real world. The killer in this movie, she's like 26, and they say that she's done this like more than a dozen times. Come on. Like, we're already stretching believability by making it a lesbian story because it's like that power dynamic just doesn't exist. It doesn't feel like this was a movie made by anybody who is a lesbian or has known a lesbian. It's not a great movie. I didn't have a good time watching it. I don't recommend it. Thingu. We didn't watch this. I watched this on my own. It's a short. It's what if John Carpenter's The Thing, but it was Pingu, the penguin. It's good. It's cute. October 21st, 2022, we watched Little Shop of Horrors from 1986. Little Shop, my history with that movie is that I watched the original because it was the first film appearance of Jack Nicholson. And I was a weird little movie nerd when I was in high school. Obviously, I've reformed and I'm not a weird little movie nerd anymore. So I watched that movie in black and white and thought, oh, this is all right. And then I watched a musical and I didn't like it because I was boring and I hadn't discovered gender yet. I hadn't rewatched Little Shop since probably 2009, 2010. And I loved it. It's great. It's such a good movie. You don't need me to sing its praises. Little Shop of Horrors is a hilarious, wonderful musical comedy that is... Say what you will about the 80s. At least comedies back then were about, like, bastards, weird little guys that just sort of made noises and you laughed at them. I don't know. I missed when the actors had faces. The one thing that I'll say about Little Shop is that the remastered version with the original ending, the apocalypse ending, I'd never seen the original ending before. Oh my God. It's awesome. Just if you want to see a bunch of Audreys just blowing up Earth, it is so cool. It's so good. Also, bonus recommendation, if you want to watch the original Little Shop of Horrors, there is actually a colorized high-def remaster on Archive of Our Own that you can just watch. Archive of Our Own. No, incorrect. The Internet Archive. Very different website. If you find that, I guess I'll link it in the description. It is very different. It's so good. I remember not really liking the original when I watched it. Like, it was like a cheap 2-cent DVD that I got that was like horrible, wretched VHS transfer. And none of it came through. But you watch this colorized version, and the jokes land. It's like a good movie, man. It's like an actually good movie, and I was surprised to realize how much of the stuff that is in the musical just does come from the original. So go watch that. It's free. Bride of Reanimator. It's Bride of Reanimator. It's perfect. Reanimator is also perfect. It's a little bit more perfect, but Bride of Reanimator is also perfect. Herbert West is a homosexual icon, and I would let him gaslight me. I wish he would reanimate my corpse. I like Reanimator. It's good. Bride of Reanimator is great. Great practical effects, great sense of humor, weird, off-putting, awesome, perfect, whatever. Malignant, 2021. Also, perfect movie. I was not expecting to love Malignant because I am not a fan of this director's stuff or any of the new generation of horror. Even the ones that people like, I'm not a huge fan of. But Malignant rules because it's extremely silly. Don't go in expecting to watch a horror movie. Just let it be what it is because it rules. It's so weird. I don't even know what to say about it besides the fact that I just had a great time. The Wolf House. We watched this on October 23rd. The Wolf House from 2018. This is a stop motion film that is about Colonia Dignidad, but it doesn't say that in the film. You just know. If you know, you know. One of the most incredible films I've ever seen in my entire life, and I never want to watch it ever again. Transforma a mi cerdito en criatura hermosa que nunca me abandonará. Yeah, so it's yeah, there you go. After that, we watched Mad God, Phil Tippett's Mad God, which came out in 2021. That's a great, weird movie. That's a stop motion movie that's just a bunch of special effects. What's it about? It's about Phil Tippett being a mad god. Great visual effects. It is everything that everybody says that it is, and you watch it and you go, yep, that sure was the movie that I just watched. And you file that away in the back of your head for whenever you're hanging out with a bunch of your friends and you've got YouTube going and you don't know what to watch, so you're just sort of like passing around the phone or whatever to pick random videos. You're like, hey, you guys ever seen Mad God? And they're like, no, I've never seen Mad God. What's that? And then you find like one clip from it and they'll go, oh, wow, that was so weird. That was really cool. And you're like, yeah, that's really cool. The whole movie is like that. And then you move on and they never watch it. That same day, then I watched The Bad Guys. For the second time. The Bad Guys. This is not a spooky movie. I just watched it. I watched The Wolf House, and then I watched Mad God, and I decided, you know what? I want to feel good today, so I'm going to watch The Bad Guys. What do you want me to say about The Bad Guys? It's a heist movie about some cartoon animals that are really well rendered, and I feel extremely normal. October 25th, we watched Funeral Parade of Roses. Also not a spooky movie. It is a 60s pink film from Japan. Is that right? 60s? 69. Yeah, so it's a Japanese pink film that is about transgender women. It's a pseudo-documentary that is also an Oedipal story. It's an adaptation of Oedipus. It's Japanese new wave cinema, so it's very over-the-top and strange. Great movie. I don't really know what to say about it besides you should watch it, especially if you're a trans person and you want to feel like there's ever a sort of historical precedent for our existence in the past. There you go. There's a movie for you. For movie marathons, I'll just comment. I'm just going to take this opportunity to comment on this. We always try to vary the stuff that we watch, so we'll try to get in some classics. You know, we started with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and there's a handful of others that we get in there, but we like to try to challenge ourselves to watch stuff that is sort of like different. So actually in the first year, I recommended that we watch Michael Clayton. And that went over really well because I framed Michael Clayton as a legal drama that is also a Lovecraftian horror story, which it is. But it just so happens that the sort of eldritch entities at work are corporations. So that's sort of the spirit that we go about this in, is how do we watch how do we frame different kinds of movies to be part of this conversation? And Funeral Parade of Roses was one of those. November 2017. Imagine if The Witch was more like an Ingmar Bergman film and it was about medieval peasant magic. It is fascinating. It's sort of a Faustian Romeo and Juliet narrative. Also, sometimes you can just sell your soul to make a bone robot to do your chores for you. I think it's great. I loved it. What is the plot of November? I barely remember. It's just sort of a ride. It's like young girl who has the ability to turn into a wolf, wants the hand of a guy, but he has eyes for some other girl, and there's witches, there's a plague. What's most interesting about this movie for me is the way that it depicts medieval magic and peasant magic as just sort of extant and just normal. Yeah, you go down to the crossroads, sell your soul to the devil for a little bone robot that'll do your chores for you. There's no like moral weight put to it in the kind of like grand dramatic sense. It's just, oh yeah, these are things that exist. I've got to file my taxes and also go down to the crossroads to sell my soul to the devil again. Ugh. It's a good movie. I recommend it. The Night of the Hunter from 1955. I loved it. It's ballooning in my brain as one of my favorite movies that I watched. This guy who is supposedly a priest comes into this town and discovers this widow who has these two kids. The two kids are our protagonists. This priest gets married to her. He's the guy that What Keeps Us Alive is about. He's the guy who goes in and marries women for their money and then kills them. Now that's the premise of the movie, but a whole lot of the runtime is just following the kids after the sort of events occur, as they're just kind of on the run. This movie has so many images, just great, astonishing images. I've heard mixed things about this movie for years, and I don't understand any of the mix. I thought it was fantastic, but I particularly was moved by this character at the end, who is played by Lillian Gish. She was one of the most prolific actors of the silent era. Is also a prolific filmmaker in her own right, and she's in this as this woman who sort of takes in orphan kids. What I most appreciated about this movie is that it is ultimately about the resilience of children and how amazing it is that children are able to withstand the traumas that they withstand. This is a film that has tremendous empathy for children and has tremendous disdain for most adults, which is how I feel a lot of the time. And I cried at the end. Like, the main lady gives some bit of a staring at the camera. Let me tell you what this movie is about. But it got me, because it's a movie that has empathy for victims of abusive households, and it's like kind of in love with victims in that regard, in a way that felt very personal and true and real and meant a lot to me to see. It's got a bit of a, like, it's a horror movie, but it also has like flashes of sort of like almost like children's book kind of fare. It's a weird tonal, all over the place movie, but I don't know. I found that to really carry me through. I very much want to return to this movie and just kind of study its appearance, because there's so much lighting. There's just images, so many loaded images, and I love a movie with images. October 29th, Scanners, David Cronenberg movie about psychics. What do you want me to say about Scanners? It's great. Immediately after that, we watched Crimes of the Future, which came out this year. Also David Cronenberg. There's a movie that is perfect. I cannot remember the last time I watched a movie where I kept thinking, ooh, here's an interesting read of like, oh, we could look at surgery here as a metaphor for sex or for sexual expression or for gender identity or a bunch of other things. Just trying to read the message, read what Cronenberg is trying to get across. And this is one of the first films that I've watched in a long time where I felt like every read that I came up with was supported by the text pretty soon after I noticed it. You get so used to doing aggressive reads on movies that when a movie just kind of embraces what it is and encourages you to see lots of different things in it, it can almost overwhelm you. I love Kristen Stewart. I will watch Kristen Stewart in anything. I love Viggo Mortensen. I'm so glad that David Cronenberg is able to bring Viggo Mortensen out of the cave that he lives in every once in a while to do like a really great performance. Viggo Mortensen is just such a good actor, and I am really, 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 really glad that he doesn't act very often. I'm very glad that he only takes the roles that he really wants to do. I would be really sad if he became just another guy in Hollywood. Like, Viggo Mortensen stars in The Croods 3 as Bloggable. I don't want that. I don't want that. You don't want that. I'm glad it's not the reality we live in. Hopefully it will remain that way. Is that really all I have to say about Crimes of the Future? I feel like I had so much that I thought about as I watched it, and I immediately, once we were done watching it, I went to my computer and just started watching it again and was like scanning through different scenes. Very dense movie, a lot of things going on, very much about gender. If you're a trans woman and you watch this movie, you're gonna get a lot of feelings. You're gonna feel some things. You're gonna have some opinions. It's a movie that's about how art movements are infiltrated by government spies sometimes, and the conflicting emotions associated with that. It's very clearly coming from a place of understanding viscerally what performance art is and why people like it and why performers would do it. Where I feel like a lot of films that are about art or art making really crawl up their own ass and die there. And this is not one of those. And it's great. Yeah, you should watch Crimes of the Future. October 30th, we did another double feature. This one started with Ginger Snaps, which is a werewolf movie about Ginger becoming a werewolf with her, and her sister is there with her, and she snaps. Werewolves as teen adolescence story. Werewolves as puberty. It's good. It pairs really well with Jennifer's body, I would say. My feeling on Ginger Snaps, jeez. My feeling on Ginger Snaps was that this movie came out in the year 2000. The suburban setting and the outfits and the music and their idea of like goth emo kids. You can see here the evolution of The Breakfast Club, the kind of 80s disaffected youth movie, and now we're getting into the 2000s disaffected youth movie. And it's such an interesting film for that because it came out in the year 2000. A little thing happened in 2001 called 9/11 that ruined culture. It just made culture bad forever. We haven't recovered from it, and we never will. Ginger Snaps feels like the last gasp of the pre-9/11 world. This is what the world looked like before we went completely out of our minds. It's a movie that could not exist today. It's a movie that could not exist a year after it was made. It's not flawless, and I think it goes on about 30 minutes too long. But when it works, it works. My real one complaint is that the werewolves are too slimy. And then the second movie we watched that day was The Lost Boys. I have a poster for it up there. You can't see that poster because it's out of frame. What can you say about The Lost Boys that hasn't already been said? It's a big, loud, dumb vampire movie that is awesome and rules and is perfect. I love Kiefer Sutherland in this movie. I love all of the everybody in this movie. It's a vampire movie with lots of homosexual vibes, which I always appreciate. It's got the Frog Brothers. I don't know what their deal is, but I love them. This movie just has so much in it. So much that is there and you don't know why, and you don't know how they arrived at the choices that they made, but thank God that they did make those choices, though. If somebody had to make this train wreck, I'm glad it was Joel Schumacher. Nobody else. No one does it like Joel Schumacher. And then October 31st, we watched Ghostwatch, which is what we end all of our marathons with. I have now seen Ghostwatch more times than I've seen a bunch of movies, actually. Ghostwatch is great. Ghostwatch is a... when was it made? 1992 is a BBC production that only aired once, nominally a ghost hunting documentary where the network has put on this whole production where they're going to monitor this house where there has been supposed poltergeist activity, and we're doing interviews with the family and seeing them in their location and seeing if we can get any evidence of the spooky goings-on camera. And it's played very much like this is really like it's played very realistic. It's not a found footage movie, but it feels of a piece with the genre in the sense that it's like, oh, this is a real news program that exists in real life, and it doesn't play at being fiction at all. It does what it does better than anything that has ever tried to do it since. I don't want to spoil it because I love how it ends. The ending is so wild. It's just a cool movie. It actually just got like a really solid Blu-ray release that I just found out about. I want to pick it up because this movie is something else. I highly recommend. It's like, what if Paranormal Activity was competent? Now, that's the last thing that we were supposed to have watched, but I watched something else. I watched The Viewing is an episode of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, directed by Panos Cosmatos, who also directed Beyond the Black Rainbow and Mandy, which are two of my favorite movies ever now. He would have to do a lot to make me not just sight unseen watch any of his movies with complete confidence that they're going to be amazing. And I would say that The Viewing is almost as good as Mandy and Beyond the Black Rainbow. And really the only reason why I qualify it with the almost is that it doesn't have the runtime to get the last like 25 minutes in that it needs to really be a Panos Cosmatos movie. It sort of ends... It ends a little bit early, in my opinion. I thought it was a lot of fun. I love Panos Cosmatos. I just... so much color, so much texture, so much weirdness. It feels like it's stilted. The dialogue is stilted and the delivery is stilted. And it feels like that was very much on purpose. And that's what I like about Panos Cosmatos, is he's trying to always sort of create this 70s vibe that just feels so authentic in a way that it's not cloying, it's not try hard, it just is what it is. And I respect any director that makes movies like that are just, they just are what they are. They don't make apologies for themselves. They don't try to justify what they are. They just trust you, the audience, to know what you like. If you don't like it, don't watch it. If you do like it, watch it. If you didn't like it and you watched it, then I don't know, suffer. Oh yeah, what's The Viewing about? The Viewing is about an assembly of experts being brought to a place by a rich weirdo to look at a thing he found and tell him what it is. And it turns out that the thing that he found is space's very own the devil. It's awesome. I love it. I just love what he does with these. He gives us these like rich, suave, new agey billionaires, and then just lets us see how stupid and full of shit they are, and then lets us watch them die horribly. It's really gratifying, and I'm a fan of it. I'm here for it. I haven't watched all of the Cabinet of Curiosities. I'm sort of 2 and 2 on the ones that I liked. I watched some other ones. I might as well go ahead and talk about them. I also watched The Outside, which is an adaptation of an Emily Carroll comic. It's a very loose adaptation. The Outside is about a woman who sells skin... No, the comic is about a woman who sells skincare stuff. The movie, this episode is about a woman who works at a bank, and she is ugly. All of the people around her are beautiful, and she goes to a Christmas party, and they give her a bunch of this miracle skincare stuff. It had some issues. It sort of like strides a weird line between like, is this ableist? Is this kind of too mean to people with funny faces? But the husband in it, like everybody in it is really interesting. I was carried forward by just how odd the vibe was, and the ending is astonishing. The last 5 minutes of this episode, this short film, I guess, launched it up in the ranks for me. It ends with this woman having been fully assimilated by this slime monster made of beauty care lotion. She now has, you know, big tits and looks pretty and dresses nice, and she goes to the bank. And all of her banker friends suddenly like her. She's like surrounded by them, and then she starts levitating into the air in this subjective thing. And she looks into the camera. She's like laughing, and then she starts like, huh, and then she laughs, and she just sort of like, her performance is great, and the emotion and the conflict and the horror, it just lands. It just lands, man. It's great. And then there was Lot 36, which was the first episode of Cabinet of Curiosities. Not very good. Didn't like it that much. And then there was Pickman's Model that also wasn't very good. Pickman's Model is an adaptation of a Lovecraft story that it has Crispin Glover in it doing a funny accent. A lot of people don't like his funny accent in that. I think the reason why nobody likes Crispin Glover's funny accent in Pickman's Model is because nobody else in the movie had funny accents. And I think he's the only actor in it that is trying to make it good at all. And I think it's a shame because it could have been really interesting. It's a really interesting premise. I wrote actually a very long review, way longer than it had any right to be. I got so carried away in the potential of this story, and I will not be reading this review because it's very long. Like I said, it does have like it's frustrating in that it's set in the early 1900s. And it doesn't really do anything with that. And it does the thing that frustrates me the most with movies set in that time period, where they just sort of blindly recreate the aesthetic signifiers of that era that they have been handed down by other media. So they like invoke World War I, but they don't really do anything with it, and they don't like it. It just feels like there's not really much thought put into the actual era, the historicity of what's going on. I don't know. It's not very good. You can read my review about it if you want. All right, those are all the movies that I watched in the month of October of 2022. I hope that this brought you some spooky feelings here in this horrible month of December of 2022. Let's all just take a moment to appreciate the fact that this year is finally coming to an end, and we'll be bringing with it almost assuredly a worse year. So watch some movies and try not to think about it. I can't end the video that way.